Hi, it's Emily again. I'm here from Kidlit Book Club to talk to you a little bit about the Raggedy Ann books by Johnny Gruelle. And these are from my vintage collection. And so, of course, you've heard about Raggedy Ann. We've all seen the dolls and maybe seen the cartoons. Raggedy Ann was patented by Johnny Gruelle in 1915 based on an old rag doll that his daughter Marcella pulled out of an attic and drew button eyes on and designed. And he somehow sold the idea of a Raggedy Ann doll based on that doll and became the owner of the Raggedy Ann concept. In 1918, Johnny Gruelle wrote his very first Raggedy Ann book, Raggedy Ann Stories. This is an original 1918 copy from the very first printing of Raggedy Ann from my beautiful collection by P.F. Vollen Company. And if you're looking at your copyright and it says anything but P.F. Vollen and Company, even if it says 1918, 1919, 1920, there's another company that published some after this. I think it was Donahue or something like that. Then it's not an original first printing. So this book is in gorgeous condition. And Johnny Gruelle went on to write many, many Raggedy Ann books. And he started turning Raggedy Ann as the doll into stories to tell his little daughter Marcella, who became ill. Because she had this Raggedy Ann doll when she was little and loved it and had all these adventures with it, but she became ill at the age of 12 and she passed away at the age of 13 from a vaccination at the time that was required for children in 1913. And 1913, she was 13 when she died. I'm not sure the actual year that she passed away. I know he wrote the first Raggedy Ann book after she had passed away. But Marcella was the one who played with Raggedy Ann. And this is a later book that he wrote after many other Raggedy Ann books where he wanted to write a story about Marcella with the Raggedy Ann. So this book is a tribute to his little girl, Marcella. She died from the vaccination. She actually took the vaccination twice. She took a vaccination the first time, and they say it didn't take. So they gave it to her again, and she became very ill, and it killed her, unfortunately. And she was sick for quite a while. She might have been 12 when she got the vaccine. She was 13 when she passed away. And so Johnny Gruelle would tell Marcella all these stories. Her beloved Raggedy Ann doll, which she kept with her in her bed when she was ill, he made up into these stories to tell her while she was sick. And that's when he later put them into the books in honor of her. So this first book, Raggedy Ann Stories, and you know, maybe I read them when I was a child, I don't know, but I was really surprised when I reread these just this week that they're actually like little books. They're longer stories. It took a couple hours to read one with breaks. And they have a lot of text. And what I love about this, and Johnny Gruelle, by the way, was also an illustrator. He illustrated them all. He was a cartoonist, brilliant artist, very talented storyteller, but there are entire whole pages of text here. And it's, you know, keep in mind the time that it was written, 1918. So children then were a little bit more into the more complicated books. So there's it's definitely still child friendly. You could read it to a child now, but it has that touch of older, you know, as you're reading it. So I think any adult would love to read the Raggedy Ann stories. And if you just look at the beautiful, beautiful pages, I mean, this one is in immaculate, pristine, gorgeous condition. And you know, this book, this first one, it reminds me very much of the original Toy Story movie. So there's the little girl, just like the little boy in Toy Story, or the kids. And the dolls, when there's no child in the room, come to life. They talk to themselves. Marcella, the little girl in the book, has all these dolls, including Raggedy Ann, her favorite, and they all talk to themselves. They get into these little adventure scrapes. Of course, Marcella doesn't know that they're technically alive. So it's super cute. It reminds me a lot of Toy Story. Each chapter is Raggedy Ann as the main doll having a little adventure. And Johnny Gruelle did all these beautiful illustrations of what his daughter Marcella looked like when she was younger. So I think it's just so touching. I love the fact that he did these books as an honorary, you know, tribute to his beautiful daughter who passed away and the dolls that she loved. And the story is adorable And if you're a vintage book collector, you definitely want to pick up a few originals. My copy here of Marcella is a little bit older, more modern. I couldn't find a vintage one that I could afford, unfortunately. But it's an exact replica of the inside pages. And I will show you, I mean, again, there are some entire, I mean, it's like a little it's kind of like a little novel in a hardback. I mean, there's definitely, this one has even more text than the other one. So it's not exactly like a little child's picture book as you would think it is. But this was an adorable book. You could definitely catch wind of his nostalgia and feelings for Marcella. This is the one book, it took him a lot of Raggedy Ann books to get himself to write. And actually credit this one, you know, to her and title it after her. There's even a dad in here that I think is supposed to be him. I also have a copy of Raggedy Ann's Wishing Pebble, and Andy, who is Raggedy Ann's brother, didn't appear until some of the later stories, so he was not in the first one. And see, this one, this copy here was 1960, so this one's a little bit older, and it has more of a rough paper with a more of a yellow tinge, almost like a more of a budget cardstock. I love this one though because it has the greatest art in it. I don't like the texture so much of the pages as I do the older ones for some reason. All the 60s books feel to me a little too rough around the edges in my opinion, so if you could find any of the Raggedy Ann and Andy books that are from the 20s, even the 30s, as far as the printing, you're going to probably be happier. But this one is really super cute. It's had a very fantasy fairy tale sort of never-ending story kind of a feel to it. And again, these are fairly fat books. So I definitely recommend the Raggedy Ann and Andy book series by Johnny Gruelle to adult, children's, or kid-lit readers. And for your older elementary, middle school kids. And if you want to read Raggedy Ann and Andy to your younger kids, you can probably find modern, inexpensive copies of this Raggedy Ann. And this one, this first one does have still a good amount of text, but I've seen some Raggedy Ann anthologies where they kind of chop up some of the stories and make them shorter for littler kids. So you could definitely do that as well. But they're very wholesome. They're cute. They're sweet. The dolls come to life. The animals have a life. Marcella is just the sweetest, cutest little girl. She reminds me so much of a little Shirley Temple. And it's very well written. It's not too childlike as far as the language for an adult to read where you'd be bored. It has enough of a little bit of a touch of a Victorian read as far as the style of writing that it was enough to keep me engaged and to find it charming. And he has a very lovely way of his prose when he describes the gardens and things like that. So I was really, again, quite surprised by the Raggedy Ann and Andy books. And he wrote several books that were not Raggedy Ann and Andy. There's well over a dozen of the Raggedy Ann books. He wrote a few fairy books as well. There's a fairy book. Let me see if I have it on my list here. He wrote, there's a book I wanted to actually buy on eBay, and it was several $100s. He wrote The Friendly Fairies. And he also wrote Johnny Mouse and the Wishing Stick, which I found an original copy of. It was far too expensive. And he wrote also, he actually did quite a few illustrations for some of the Grimm's fairy tale versions that have come out over the years. So definitely recommend Raggedy Ann and Andy for any age, honestly. But definitely, if you're a collector, look for some of the original P.F. Volland published versions from 1918 to 1920, 22, if you want some of the originals. Good luck, and you will love these books. Everything about it, I love.